Welcome, everyone. Today's panel discussion is entitled Hiring and Retention, Encouraging Diverse Candidates and Building a Culture of Inclusion. I want to welcome each of you again. My name is Hobbs, and I serve as the Director of Diversity, the Director of, getting tongue twisted, the Director of Community Engagement and Equity Initiatives for the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. Glad to have each of you here to be a part of this session with us. Before we get started, in terms of introducing our panel, I just want to share a little bit of information with you that we had from our 2022 Western New York Diversity and Inclusion Business Community Assessment. There's been an improved hiring practices across companies that have established DEI practices. Specifically, the number of respondent companies that adopted formal minority recruitment hiring policies significantly increased from 53% in 2020 to 66% in 2022. It's also worth noting that having an established minority hiring practice is significantly more likely among companies that have an established DE&I infrastructure, 87%, compared to those that did not, which rounded out to about 59%. Like in 2020, entry-level positions continue to be the greatest focus for diversity efforts, 77% in 2022, up from 74% in 2020. Now, there's been slight growth across efforts to recruit mid-level senior management, as well as minority ownership roles as well. Although these increases were modest and not statistically significant, they speak to the ongoing challenges of diversifying businesses at every level. Today, we hope that you're going to receive and understand information about the hiring process and learn about the importance of creating inclusive environments in your workplace. So let's start with the introduction of our panelists. It is my pleasure to introduce Beth Sullivan, the Director of Human Resources at United Way of Buffalo and Erie County. With over a decade of experience at United Way, Beth's role covers many aspects, including HR, recruitment, employee relations and retention, benefits and training, compensation, compliance, labor relations, safe and healthy, and supporting safety and health, and supporting United Way's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Beth holds an MBA from Medaille College. I keep saying Medaille College. I was from Medaille College, I'm sorry. Beth holds an MBA from Canisius College, now Canisius University, with a BA in communications from SUNY Geneseo. Beth has her PHR and her SHRM-CP certificates. Beth also currently volunteers on the HR committee at Feed More Western New York and was a longtime volunteer and board member for Meals on Wheels for Western New York. Beth resides in Orchard Park with her 3 sons and her husband. Please join me in welcoming Beth. Thank you for being on the panel, Beth.
Thank you, Kenya. So thanks everyone for joining us here. And then I also want to shout out to my staff. I know a lot of you are watching. This is part of our equity training. That everybody participate in this. So hello, everyone. Thanks.
Excellent. Now our next panelist is Kate Alterio, the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at People Inc. Now, Kate has responsibility for the oversight of People Inc.'s recruitment retention functions. She also co-facilitates the agency's Workforce Stability Committee. This committee addresses the areas of hiring engagement, leadership, and professional development with a focus on diversity in the workforce, which includes more than 4,000 employees. Kate is a member of the Society of Human Resource Management and has her PHR and SHRM-CP certifications as well. She is also a 2005 graduate of Leadership Buffalo's Rising Leaders. Kate is also a certified lean professional. Please join me in welcoming Kate.
Thank you, Kenya. Happy to be here.
Excellent. And our next panelist, Mr. Thaddeus Dunn, is the CEO and founder of Right Fit Recruiting. Thaddeus has supported clients across the nation, delivering high impact, high recruiting and training and development programs to exempt and non-exempt employees and organizations. As a certified minority business, Thaddeus has spent a considerable amount of time over the last 20 years developing aspiring talent as they position themselves for higher levels of responsibility and accountability. A component of his current practice includes diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as recruitment of candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. Thaddeus has 20 years experience in human resources. He has learned how to humanize the recruiting process by ensuring that candidate slates are intentional and purposeful. Thank you so much. Join me in welcoming Thaddeus to our panel.
Thank you, Kenya, for having me. Good to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you to our panel. Welcome to all of you in our viewing audience. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to open up with a poll discussion, or a poll for each of you to be able to vote on, and then we'll have our panelists kind of weigh in on the responses. The poll, as you'll see before you, says, please select one answer that best describes your recruitment process. Either for the first question, 1, I have difficulty filling positions, or B, I fill positions effortlessly, or C, I have used non-traditional ways to recruit candidates. And question number 2, which answer best describes how you see the hiring process? I feel comfortable mitigating biases in the interview process. B, I have learned about different recruiting method opportunities. Or C, I would like to learn more about hiring and retention of diverse employees. Please now take a moment and respond to this. And then we'll have our panelists kind of weigh in on that information. I always feel like there should be like some Jeopardy music playing during this moment, right? All right, let's see. Let's take a look at that. Whoa. So for the first question, a lot of you, about 67% are saying you're having difficulty filling open positions. About 4% are doing it effortlessly, huh? Yeah, so it's much more challenging. And C, about 28% of you have used some non-traditional ways. And then to the second question, folks aren't feeling too comfortable. So we got a lot to talk about here. And we're learning a lot. And 73% of you are saying, yes, I need more information. Then you've come to the right place, and we're looking forward to sharing and kicking off this conversation. We'll have our panelists respond to this for us. Anyone can jump in. What are your thoughts on these results? All right, I'm going to pick on Thaddeus to start us off.
So I would say that there's much work to be done. I'm glad that people are giving honest responses to that. So it's really good that we're being honest about that. Hey, look, I want to learn more about it. What can my company do to ramp this up? What are we doing wrong? What are you doing right? And maybe our shared collective experiences, we can help one another.
Absolutely. Great response. Kate or Beth, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I think the response about the challenge of filling positions is real, that it is a topic of conversation. I know at People Inc., as far as recruitment and filling positions timely with quality people, it's the topic of conversation. So it's interesting to see that response to that first question, that it's a challenge. So
It's a challenge, absolutely. So go ahead, Beth.
I would just say that before I would say we fell into that earlier category where we really just had such an easy time recruiting, but recent, like I'd say ever since COVID, there's people who we lose early on in the process. We contact them and then maybe they're pulled in a different direction before we even get to the first interview. So I think that everybody is in, a similar boat right now.
I think that's a great place for us to really start off on, as recognizing that it is challenging. And as Thaddeus said, it's great that folks are being transparent about that. This is difficult work, right? But we're here to make any change, any useful change is going to be difficult. It will come with its challenges, but that is why we're here. That is why we're putting the effort forward in trying to see how can we make those difficult challenges better by providing tools and resources for folks to implement at their different places of employment. So with that, let's start off with Kate. Kate, could you tell us a little bit about People Inc. and some of the strategies that you found effective in promoting diversity and inclusion in your hiring process?
Sure. So People Inc. is the largest human services agency in Western New York. We were actually started in 1970 by a group of families. And today we have a little over 200 locations throughout Western New York and into Rochester, and about 4,100 employees. So we've definitely grown over the years. As far as some strategies that we found to be effective, we really look for opportunities to advertise our positions, and we're always evaluating the effectiveness of those sources, and we're diverse in where we advertise. A recent example, just something we've done recently, is we've met with Journey's End Refugee Services to talk with them a little bit about the opportunities available at People Inc. and see if they have any potential people that may be a good fit for our positions. So that's something we've done recently. We attend a variety of job fairs. We found that it's effective to go into different communities and go to the different job fairs. Some recent events we've attended are the Salvation Army Community Resource Fair. We've done the Erie One BOCES job fair. So some things with colleges, trying to connect with colleges in the area as well. We participated in the job fair at the Central Library in Buffalo. So again, just being very diverse in where we're advertising, what events we're attending in the community to really expand our sources, our recruitment sources. So that's been our approach, and it has been effective recently.
Thank you, Kate. That's actually great. It lets you know that there are some tried and true things you can continue to utilize. Everything doesn't have to be high tech, right? The job fairs, the resource fairs, getting out there, getting the messaging out to the community in a number of different avenues and pathways is what it's all about. You have to, as an organization, be able to meet folks where they are, right? And make sure that messaging about these opportunities that various organizations and companies have are getting to the folks that you're looking for that will be successful employees in your operations. Kate, could you also share once a person is hired, what are some of the things that People Inc. does to engage and create an inclusive environment for those new hires?
Yeah, we a majority of our employees attend an orientation period. So at that orientation, they learn about the culture at People Inc. The responsibilities of their particular position are talked about. Supervisors come and attend the orientation to meet the employees, and we've found that that's effective in bringing people into our large organization. Because we are spread out so much, we want people to feel a part of a larger organization, and that has really helped us to create teamwork and inclusivity and make sure people are feeling part of a bigger group And that's really been effective. Employees get a welcome email from our president and CEO welcoming them to the organization. So those things help, again, connect people to each other and to the larger agency. We've also done something, and we're going to reinstitute it. We had to stop doing it during COVID, but we're re-implementing it. It's an orientation reunion where the group of employees that employees went to orientation with come back together, and they get some additional training during that period. And they also learn about some new things at PeopleLink, kind of like a little refresher. But it also helps these employees stay connected with one another because they may not see each other because of their different work locations and different responsibilities. So it's a nice way to bring people back together, and that's helped employees.
Oh, that's awesome. I really like the idea of the orientation reunion, right? Bringing people back together who may be separated. I love the portion of you talking about the importance of the orientation piece and the onboarding and making sure that people learn who the management is, what the culture of the organization is, and that personal touch of even getting an email from the leadership. That's awesome as a way of making someone feeling included and establishing a sense of belonging within an organization. I think those are really great tips. Thanks a lot for that. So from the perspective, I'm going to come over to you, Thaddeus. From the perspective of one who's looking through the lens of a recruiter, why do you think it's so challenging to find diverse or non-traditional talent when seeking candidates? And where should we be looking?
At any time.
Those are some really good questions. So seeking diverse candidates, as we all know, can be very daunting, right? It requires diligent work and consistent commitment from everyone. Also, you have to have a consistent strategy as well. So organizations, sometimes they fall short in identifying diverse candidates because they are not intentional, I believe. They're not intentional enough, not utilizing the right resource groups, or their website lacks a feeling of inclusion and equity. I always tell leaders, the first place a candidate is going to look is to your website to see if he or she belongs there. I tell leaders to ensure that your website is inclusive, diverse, and promotes equity. I also tell leaders that their message should have the candidate feeling like, aha, now that is where I belong and I can be valued. And so one way to attract diverse candidates, I feel, is to be intentional, like I said earlier. And the word intentional, it means something that is done with thought, done purposefully or deliberately. Many times organizations, they tend to hire people who look the same as their current workforce. Instead, what organizations should do is seek referrals from external network and associations and minority groups. Be intentional, like I said earlier, and build relationships with diverse groups and resource groups, and including HBCUs schools where diverse populations are. In other words, go where the people in which you seek to hire are. And finally, you can be intentional by being present in the moment. Show up where diverse candidates attend. It could be earlier, as Kate said, it could be career fairs, it could be seminars, it could be workshops. That is how you engage diverse candidates, by showing up, building relationships, and meeting the people where they are.
Oh, that's an excellent response. It makes me think about, it adds a little more substance to some of the comments that Sandra Quint, our keynote speaker, shared today. She touched on several of the things that you mentioned, Thaddeus, in terms of making sure your website is really diverse and that photos are worth 1,000 words, right? So being intentional, again, that theme of intentionality is running through the themes of these panel discussions, looking at the fraternal and sororities organizations, as well as professional organizations, and thinking about what are those religious or houses of worship that different people go to. I appreciate that you mentioned the HBCUs. Also consider the HSIs, the Hispanic serving institutions as well. There are so many different places, and it's vitally important, as you said, that you've got to be present in the spaces where people are. You have to meet them where they are. You can't simply be stagnant and sit on the sideline and say, oh, if I build it, they will come, right? No, you've got to be intentional and deliberate about getting your messaging out to the community, particularly to folks that you want to address and create that sense of diversity within your organization. This next question I have is for Beth. What actions has your organization taken in regard to DEI recruitment, hiring, and retention?
Okay, thank you, Kenya. First, I just want to say, you know, we're still at the earlier stages of our DEI journey, but we have made some progress that we're excited about. First, I would say set goals and measure. As an organization, we want to reflect the community that we're serving. So we're regularly monitoring staff diversity, retention, and satisfaction. One thing that maybe not everyone has, but we happen to have a board. We worked on having a diverse board, and that's really benefited in so many ways: recruitment, hiring, retention. Two of our board members have become HR committee chairs, and they've been a great resource to me and guidance in this area. Also, it's been great for sourcing. Our current CEO, Trina Barrett, served on our board. And we ended up, we first brought her in as COO, and now she leads our organization. We have, as you mentioned before, we are considering non-traditional recruitment options. This was also from our board. Social networks from our board. We looked at we regularly post to the Pan-Hellenic Council. We also, the OSHI Foundation, we share postings with their Leaders of Color program. So those are two different things that we that are relatively new that we've started to do. Also, job postings. You know, we've been doing this for a while. Our Director of Advocacy and Equity reviews our job descriptions and postings, looking at whether it creates unnecessary barriers to entry, reconsidering requirements related due to educational background. You know, you want to ask yourself, do you absolutely need to have a bachelor's degree for this role, or will work experience suffice? Recently, we posted a position that required a certification, and we decided we wouldn't require that certification. We would provide the training to the candidate. And does the posting have inclusive language? So we're looking at that as well. And so as far as hiring, we want to look at a diverse interview panel. We aim to have a diverse interview panel at each level of the interview process. A diverse candidate slate. We're intentional in working towards having a diverse candidate slate, considering continuing to source candidates until you have a diverse candidate slate. Including DEI in our interview questions. We have equity questions in the interview. Equity is one of our values, and I include that question in each interview. Bias training. We require our staff to take 7 hours of equity training. And so we included in that is an unconscious bias in recruitment and interviewing. So, and as far as retention, employee engagement, Jerome Singletary is our Director of Advocacy and Equity, and he just met with our entire staff to get feedback on our culture from an equity perspective. So engaging employees, seeing where they are, getting a pulse. As far as exit interviews, I received feedback and I made some changes to my exit interview to improve retention. asking whether we foster an inclusive environment, or how employees leaving our organization would describe our culture. So those are some of the things we've been working on.
Wow, and that's early stages of the journey. That's pretty good for early stages. It really speaks to the intentionality and the deliberateness behind setting a framework for the work for you all to move in. I love the idea of reviewing job descriptions and ensuring that there's no biased language there, or the information related to the education component. Someone mentioned in another session that if men meet about 50% of the requirements, they'll apply for the job. Women typically, if they don't meet about close to 100%, they're not going to apply for the job. And we have to think about how are we utilizing language and the power of language as we're creating these job descriptions, and what is really needed for actually performing that particular role within an organization. So that's excellent. And I love the thoughts around having the diverse interview panel. Sandra Quint, our keynote speaker, spoke on that as well. And also the idea that you should have at least 30% of your candidate slate be folks of diverse backgrounds and opportunities, and really being able to provide that bias training is excellent. Wonderful, good stuff. So Kate, I'm coming to you. I want to talk to you about, or if you can talk to us about, what are some effective ways that you ensure that diverse candidates are given an equal opportunity to showcase their skills and experiences during the interview process?
Yeah, so we ask a series of behavioral-based questions to really get a sense of how the candidate would handle situations and be able to provide examples. So it helps us to understand the person, their interpersonal skills, how they work with people, how their teamwork skills are, and it really helps us assess those abilities. And we also try to involve the people who receive services at People Inc. in that process to see how a candidate may interact with someone, how they would handle a particular situation with the person at the location where they would be working. Since People Inc. has 200 locations, 200 plus locations, we try to have the candidate actually go to the location and show us how they would work in that location. It gives them an idea of what their work location will be, what the environment will be, and it allows the candidate to show us their skills and talk to us about their experiences. And it really helps us to ensure the right fit.
Excellent information.
Sure.
I've got a couple of follow-ups for Beth that I want to just add in now, if we could. Beth, could you talk a little bit more about what is that equity question that you use in interviews?
Okay, so one of the questions that I use is how would you assist us in advancing our work in racial equity is one of them. And then let me think, what was the other one that we use? We also, how do you increase diversity awareness in your group? That's another. So I can share out at a later time more detail about what we do ask. But and there's another question as well I saw in the chat.
Oh yeah, the other question was in terms of the type of training or the training company or site that you use for your employee training.
So one of the things that we use is LinkedIn Learning. That really provides some great training for us. as a whole. It's easy to access, but also we try to have interactive training 4 times a year. And I usually try to contact local organizations. We use Child and Family Services. We have different presenters come in. We recently had the Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition come in, and we did healing circles. That was really well received. So trying to create interactive training as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that, answering those follow-up questions. Thaddeus, you talked earlier about the importance of being able to meet people where they are. Could you share with us some strategies about how do you go about building and nurturing relationships with diverse communities and talent pools to improve the diversity hiring within an organization?
Another great question. So building relationships, we all know, takes time, right? And it requires trust from everyone, from all parties. So organizations, they should realize and understand that there have been barriers in place for many years for certain groups within the workforce. To learn what social justice means, we would not be talking about this topic in the first place if equity in the workplace existed in every organization. So here's some things that I feel that you can work on. Your company can have a presence in communities. Let communities know that you care. Attend community events, sponsor events, show up, like I said earlier, be present, conduct a career fair in the community, or hold a diversity career fair at your workplace or convention center. It's about building relationships at the end of the day, right? And also representation is the best when you do outreach in different communities. Another thing we can do is utilize social media, take inventory of your workforce, ask, is it diverse? Is it inclusive? Does it promote equity? I'll give you 2 more. Be transparent. It's okay to tell candidates at the interview that your organization recognized a need to improve and being more inclusive and equitable. And also be willing to share and demonstrate how people of color are valued or can be placed in leadership roles. What is your succession plan? What does it look like for them? So I think if a person of color sees that you really are taking the time to get to know that person in that community, that background, you showing up, like when we had the top shooting, for example, I saw all kinds of companies and organizations showing up, right? Mm-hmm. Delivering food. And that kind of like sends a message that, hey, guess what? Business is off. We're going to look at everyone as being human and people. We have to roll up our sleeves and we have to look at each one as being human. And so when you are present in that community, then it shows like, oh, wow, you know what? TOPS cares. People Inc. cares. United Way cares, right? Mm-hmm. You're saying all these companies cares because they got involved.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a really key point, that you have to be involved, right? You have to meet people where they are. And the whole notion of relationship building is everything is born out of relationships, right? Whether it's the companies that we go to, the schools that we decide to attend, it's all born out of the relationships that we're able to make with the people that are already there. So it is vitally important that we think about that. And again, here's that word again, be intentional about building and nurturing those relationships so that people have a sense of belonging and have a sense of, oh, I can see myself working at this venue, and I can see myself being promoted and growing and having that investment made in me by senior leadership or other supervisors, so that I am becoming the best version of myself each time I walk through that door and provide my services to this particular organization. Thank you so much for that, Thaddeus. I also, just as a follow-up question, what do companies need to do to more successfully integrate their new hires into that company and into the culture?
So I have just maybe 3 or 4. So employee resource groups are very important. And what an employee resource group does, it allows the employees who feel isolated the chance to connect and share experiences with one another. These groups also can identify future diverse leaders. They can bring other leaders into your organization, right? Then also support mentoring groups. Give your new employees a greater incentive to stay with your organization by introducing them to mentors. Setting them up for a formal development plan is very, very important, right? And it can also encourage them by showing them, hey, look, if you learn this skill set, this is where you can be. Don't be afraid to also to talk about your successes of people of color who are in leadership positions, right? So if I'm coming in maybe at a lower level, like, okay, well then, Mr. Johnson, he worked himself up. I know someone now that worked at Roswell who came in, at a low level. Now he's a very high level and a good friend of mine. And then lastly, this is the message for recruiters like myself. So once you bring the candidate in, you need to check with the candidate that you onboarded. Instead, a lot of recruiters, they just hire you and then that's the one deal. But check in on them like for 60 days, right? See how they're doing, see what some hiccups are. How are they getting along? Is it what they thought that it would be? And then finally, most employees decide whether to stay or leave within 90 days. That means there's no time to waste. When showing your company's commitment to DEI, you have to act really quickly and keep connected and keep the relationship open and honest.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You hear that, folks? You got 90 days to make a good impression. So we got to figure it out. We have to make sure that we are utilizing, for those of you that are large enough to utilize and have ERG groups or employee resource groups, that's wonderful. That's a great tool to be able to implement. But everyone, whether you're large enough for an ERG, there's always a mentoring opportunity that you can create, and it doesn't require a lot of individuals in order to do that. Sandra Quince, our keynote speaker today, also spoke about the importance of sponsorship, right? Having a senior leader that can help you and assist you in developing and growing through that process, and being that individual to speak your name in rooms that you might not be able to be in, so that you can say, hey, take a look at Beth, or take a look at Thaddeus, or take a look at Kate. They're doing some great work and we should really consider them for this next opportunity. So definitely all good points. And then just check in, right? You get a new employee, you want somebody to say, well, after they show you where the restrooms are and the lunchroom is, you want to know what else is there? How can I be incorporated into this culture? How do you give me that sense of belonging? And that really is a simple way of just checking in. Hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? How are things going? Is there anything that I can do to help you better acclimate to this environment? That is good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you so much. So Beth, I want to come over to you. In terms of recruiting, we've talked about how successful recruiting is a long journey, right? It's not a short process. That this DE&I work is not a destination, but it's a journey. It's an ongoing process. Can you talk about what have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced along your DEI journey in terms of the organization?
Sure, thanks. One of the challenges is moving from strategy to action. So United Way developed a 5-year strategic plan, and equity was added as a value and considered a strategic priority. But once you need to take it from that strategic point to what tactical steps do you need to make sure things happen. And so that's always challenging, that transition. And I think we're moving along with that, but it's always a challenge. And then also finding time to build a strong foundation. We first started, I was leading a lot of the DEI work, and back in 2019, we had a DEI committee called TIDE, Team Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. And we coordinated and created a foundation reflecting on what had been done right in the past and what needed, where we needed to change, engaging staff, training, reviewing our recruitment strategy, all need dedicated time, and we're a really relatively small organization. My job, includes a lot of other things. I'm basically a generalist, so I'm handling, benefits and training and a lot of other things. So setting aside that time, because it's such a critical piece of the organization and so important, and finding that time and finding others, with our DEI committee, staff was very enthusiastic, but when we had subcommittees, they couldn't always commit that time, so that was a challenge. Also staying focused and prioritizing equity. Every step, as I said before, every step of the recruitment process should have an equity focus: postings, job descriptions, interview training, the interview panel, interview questions, so on, as I said before, but also budgetary constraints. So as we moved along in this process, we recognized we needed a role that focused a majority of the time on equity. So we started out with me, and I couldn't, maybe give it the time that we needed. And then when we brought on our COO, it was part of her role. But she was also divided with time. And now, we have a director of advocacy and equity, and that's really bringing things forward. So like you said, it's a journey.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much, Beth. I'm really intrigued by the thought that you shared in terms of moving from strategy to action, right? It has to be a living process. It can't simply be a policy that we wrote up and stuck somewhere on the shelf or put in a frame in our big lobby so everybody can see that we are all about DE&I, if it doesn't ever convert to the action that is taking place on a daily and regular basis, and the exchanges that are happening between employees and between supervisors and employees. It's got to become real and tangible. I love that. I also appreciate the fact that you talked about the importance of equity being key, right? I had a supervisor that once told me, here's how he quickly explained the difference, his version of the difference between equality and equity. He said, equality is giving everybody a pair of shoes. He said, he said, equality is giving everybody a pair of shoes, right? But then when you think about what's equity, you have to figure out what size shoe everyone gets, right? Otherwise, you could just be giving everybody a pair of size 9, and it's equal, but it's not equitable, right? So we really need to focus on what does equity look like in addition to diversity and being inclusive. So really good stuff. Thank you so much, Beth. What other tips might you be able to share to create an inclusive environment?
So I would say, first off, you have to get buy-in from senior leadership. And we've really been blessed that we've always had great support. And this has been taken to a new level with our CEO, Trina, now. As I said before, she led our equity initiatives as our COO and now as our CEO. Getting everyone on the same page, working on, and this has to do with the training, that we have shared language, and that improving transparency. We're working on a compensation project, and I think that's going to improve transparency, improve our job descriptions, even take them to the next level. Working on building an inclusive, equity-minded culture, that, as I said before, the strategic plan that we set a foundation for this. Normalizing self-care and recognizing that a traumatic event such as 514 may impact people of color differently than white people. And also, again, the Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition and came to our organization to conduct healing circles. And that was really well received.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that contribution. And the importance of identifying that people in your area of work can be impacted by issues that may not have directly happened within your place of work, but it does impact how we move and go about our daily lives and the work that we're doing when things are happening out into the community, particularly when it is happening to folks that are of the demographic representation that we are a part of, right? So that is very important to have that sense of intentionality as well. Kate, can you talk to us about, and because we've covered this a little bit, I want to see if you can share a little bit more light on it. How can organizations ensure that their job postings are more transparent and equitable when it comes to attempting to mitigate bias in that way?
Sure. Yeah, and I think Beth mentioned this too about, job postings. We at People Inc., we try to ensure our postings list the minimum qualifications necessary. And if something is more of a nice to have type of qualification, it's listed as preferred. So it really lists the minimum, what's necessary for the position, focusing on the responsibilities of the role, and that helps to make things very transparent and equitable. This is what the job requirements, this is what the job entails, and really focus on those responsibilities. We also have a process, a job evaluation process, where our positions are measured on factors such as minimum qualifications, minimum experience, the level of communication that's necessary, the level of decision making that's necessary. So that process, and it's shared with supervisors, so they know this is how jobs are measured, this is how your position is measured, and all jobs across People Inc. are measured in that way. And it helps maintain consistency and that transparency piece we've touched on. And again, it really helps just to bring people together and understand this is how my job is evaluated. This is what People Inc. values as important, and sharing that with people really helps. And again, that whole piece about the job postings, ensuring that it's focused on the qualifications, the minimum qualifications necessary. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. Yes, we want to make sure that we've got enough in our job descriptions that we know that candidates can do the job, but we don't want to be disqualifying people from opportunities that they can participate in simply because we're trying to front load everything into that job description to address everything that went wrong with the last employee, right? And it feels like job descriptions become like that, and that's not the way we should be going about the work. So, but it is the importance of how do we focus on those minimum qualifications. Thank you so much for that, Kate, and sharing a little more light on that. So this is going to be my final question before we go into questions from our listening or viewing audience. And this is for each of the panelists to give a response to. What are some of the best practices for hiring, retaining, and promoting diverse talent within an organization? I think you've all highlighted different components of that. So we'll do kind of a lightning round of this, and anyone can jump in.
Sure. I mean, I can start. People Inc. Yeah, sure. People Inc. has a workforce stability committee. I think that was mentioned early on, and it's made up of HR people and various leaders in different departments and programs throughout People Inc. And the model focuses on 4 areas, focuses on hiring, leadership, professional development, engagement. Those are the things that we feel are the most important factors to retaining and promoting a diverse workforce. So we come up and develop initiatives around those factors. The leadership piece, we have a succession management program where we look at developing our leadership skills of our supervisors. Hiring, we focus on ensuring the diversity of where we're advertising, sponsoring events in the community, attending events in the community. Professional development, looking at our tuition reimbursement program and looking at who's utilizing that program and how we can tap into them for job opportunities at People Inc. And the engagement piece, really this year we're doing an employee engagement survey again, and we're incorporating DEI questions in that survey to ensure that we understand what do our employees value, who are our employees and what do they value and what do they want to see more of. So we feel like getting a pulse on our organization through this survey will help us determine what our employees are really feeling is important and what we're doing well. So
thank you for that contribution, Kate. Beth?
Sure.
Yes, I would just say we've already touched on hiring, but as far as retention, including equity and performance management, including that staff and managers are evaluated on equity. And then also for promoting, I would recommend being open-minded. As a smaller nonprofit organization, we're required to be multitaskers. We don't always have a direct path to the next level. And skills can be developed through a project or filling in when a colleague's on leave. Being willing to advance someone who has most, but maybe not all of the desired skill set, and help them to develop the remaining skills needed for that role.
Thank you so much. Thaddeus.
Yeah, and I just like to touch on like once you invite someone to a dance and then you don't dance with them, I mean, you should have just probably never invited them, right? So I just want to say that. So if you're going to invite someone into your house or to a dance and not dance with them, then that's kind of like, wow, really? So I would say develop and groom that new employee who you thought would be the best fit for that position. Make sure you develop them so that they can be put on your succession plan, right? So if you thought highly of them during the interview, and then when they get there, like, oh, wait a minute, you should continue that same enthusiasm, same excitement that you had when you brought them in. So continue to elevate them.
Thank you all so much for that feedback. We're going to switch over now to the participant questions. I see Amy has a question, so I'll read this to the group and then each of you can respond in your own way. Amy says, I'm using a lot of this feedback to think about recruitment and retention of graduate and professional students, and most of it really applies. Do you feel the how would you assist us with DEI initiatives question? Would that be appropriate for that type of applicant? Or is it bad form for them? And how would you help when the expectation is that we are doing the work for them? So go ahead, Thaddeus.
Oh, I don't think that's an inappropriate question for anyone, actually, especially in today's world now. I mean, people are all you have to do is turn on the television, you see the whole world is in an uproar, right? So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think they have to actually understand what the DEI, what that work means, understand the full definition what DEI means, I think. But I don't think that it's not an appropriate question that you should not ask. I think you should ask. And you'll be surprised. They may have some experience in school where they were not treated fairly or whatever, right? Where equity didn't come into play. So you'll be surprised. I would not underestimate young people.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. Anyone else want to chime in before we go on? Okay. So another question I have for you all. What's one thing that you would like people to walk away from today's session with? Go for it, Beth.
Okay, so I would say that they should be patient, that advancing DEI initiatives takes time. If your budget permits, commit to having someone on your team whose primary responsibility is DEI.
Excellent advice. Thaddeus?
I would say again to go where the people are who you want to hire, to be present in their communities and be present where they're at.
Thank you.
And be intentional. And be intentional. Sorry.
And be intentional. Got it. Kate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think being diverse and flexible in your approach to recruiting and advertising, and really, I think Thaddeus said it, Beth said it, really going to the communities where you want to draw candidates, and I think you need to be diverse and flexible in that approach, and try different things you may not have thought about before. So I think that's just important, being open and flexible to that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we're gonna wrap up with this catch-all question for everyone to respond to, and then we'll get you back into the final session. So what is one thing that you would like our audience to know that we haven't discussed during this session? I know we've gone through a lot of information, right? This has been a rich experience. Just one thought. See, that's what happens when you get a good panel together.
I would say that the data, I don't know how much we've touched on data, but I think data is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to be able to measure things, right? And
yeah.
what are those metrics that really impact DE&I efforts and show progress is happening?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Beth made about data, you know, and that's something we didn't touch on in this session, but we've been trying to do a lot of that at People Inc., really pulling the data and our surveys, really helping to understand what our employees feel is important. So for sure, the data is key.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely good point. It reminds me of the response that individuals say, what gets measured, what gets managed gets measured, right? Or what gets measured, I'm getting it. You know what I'm talking about, folks. I love this session. I love the transparency that each of you have shared during this session. I want to thank everyone for providing such insightful information for our viewing audience to think about, kind of chew on, and determine how they might advance forward in their next steps. This has been a great panel. Thank you all. Thank you to our viewing audience. I appreciate all of you for joining us today.